Every American knows the story of the Alamo, a tale of heroic men who chose to die for freedom against impossible odds, a legend of sacrifice that gave birth to a revolution. But what if that legend is wrong? What if the real story isn't about flawless heroes, but about fatal flaws? Flaws in leadership. A bitter rivalry between two proud men that brought them to the brink of mutiny on the eve of annihilation. Flaws in loyalty. Untrained volunteers abandoned by their government, watching their legendary hero die not in a blaze of glory, but slowly, mysteriously, in a sickbed. And flaws in strategy. A doomed fortress that was never meant to withstand an army, defended by a handful of men who refused to surrender even when a red flag in the distance promised them no mercy. Tonight, we uncover the story the history books didn't tell you. This is not the simple legend of the Alamo you were taught. This is the story of the flawed, complex, and utterly human men inside those walls, and the unanswered questions that died with them. Why did rivals Travis and Bowie fire a final defiant cannon shot together? What secret illness, or darker fate, truly killed James Bowie? And why did Santa Anna's unstoppable army pay such a bloody price for a victory they were always destined to win? The Alamo fell. 188 men died. But the truth is far more compelling than the myth. But before we begin, make sure to like and subscribe to our channel to help support our community. As white settlers from the American South pushed deeper into Texas, they carried ambitions of acquiring property to establish cotton farms. Mexico's cotton trade was flourishing during this period, attracting numerous individuals eager to gain wealth. However, the Mexican government mandated that colonists fulfill two stipulations to reside in the region. Firstly, they were obliged to adopt Catholicism. Secondly, they were required to enroll as official citizens of Mexico. After settling, numerous newcomers disregarded these regulations, damaging relations with their hosts from the outset. Further intensifying the discord, the majority of immigrants came with enslaved individuals, despite Mexico having abolished slavery in 1829. As colonists continued to violate Mexican statutes, keeping enslaved workers and seizing lands outside their authorized borders, the Mexican nation was undergoing its own political transformation. Originally patterned on the decentralized federal model of the United States, mounting economic instability and pervasive unrest prompted conservative factions to centralize power into a unified government. This new administration imposed more rigorous application of commercial taxes, prohibitions on slavery, and controls on migration. For colonists in Mexican Texas's frontier zones, this meant impending difficulty. A large number were immigrants without proper papers whose operations depended on enslaved labor. Denouncing the measures as tyrannical, the settlers began uprisings. Mexican leaders blamed the instability on unlawful settlers from the United States who opposed adhering to the country's regulations. The initial combat of the Texas Revolution happened in October 1835 at the Battle of Gonzalez, although hostilities had begun earlier in a settlement created by Green DeWitt. DeWitt had previously convinced Mexican officials to grant the community a small cannon for protection against attacks from groups considered hostile. When Mexico learned DeWitt's representatives had participated in assemblies seen as seditious, Colonel Domingo de Ugartechea was commanded to retrieve the weapon. Although he expected some resistance, the colonel probably never envisioned that this straightforward mission would trigger initial fights between Texan colonists and Mexican soldiers, conflicts that quickly escalated into full-scale warfare and, eventually, a war for independence. As predicted, the Texans refused the order to surrender the cannon. Making their position perfectly clear, they hoisted a banner above the gun that defiantly read, "Come and take it." Within a matter of days, the Texan militia expanded to more than 160 individuals. Launching a sudden attack, they defeated the Mexican troops. This engagement marked the true beginning of the Texas Revolution. Although now known as a fortress, the Alamo was first built as a religious mission, a complex that provided housing and logistical support for missionary work. After attacks from nearby native groups, Mexican Army units later converted the location into a makeshift military outpost. However, the adapted design was intended to withstand attacks from tribal warriors, not extended cannon fire. It also did not feature specialized openings for rifles. Raised platforms allowed defenders to shoot over the parapets but left them vulnerable from the chest up when standing, a major disadvantage in combat. After the fighting at Gonzalez, numerous settlers who had helped drive back the Mexican army went back to their farms. Unequipped for a long campaign and short on provisions, their exit swiftly left the Texan military with under 200 troops. This reduced number was vastly insufficient for garrisoning a post such as the Alamo. In December 1835, Sam Houston, leading the Texan Army, ordered James Neal to take charge of the Alamo's defense. Neal obeyed, but left his command months afterwards to care for ailing family members. Authority then passed to Lieutenant Colonel William B. Travis, the highest-ranking officer on site. Word of Travis's new role angered Colonel James Bowie, who was famous for his distinctive blade. Many of the troops agreed with this view, electing Bowie to lead them because of his formidable reputation in battle. This arrangement could have resolved the dispute, but Bowie celebrated his new command by arriving drunk and causing a disturbance in the fort. In the end, he agreed to share control with Travis. Mexican leader Santa Anna became increasingly furious as the uprising in Texas continued. He considered the rebels to be unlawful immigrants who had entered his country, disrespected its traditions and regulations, and were now attempting to steal its land. Predictably, he ordered them to capitulate or be destroyed. The Texans refused his demands, leading Santa Anna to declare them rebels and promise to take no prisoners. He documented this policy in a dispatch to American leader Andrew Jackson. However, this communication was not widely distributed, and Jackson failed to notify U.S. volunteers that Mexico intended to kill any prisoners. The Alamo's leaders had a clear-eyed view of their precarious position. Conscious of their deficits in manpower and provisions, they understood the impending danger when the Mexican army appeared. Colonel James Neal desperately appealed to General Sam Houston for support. Houston, judging reinforcements to be impossible, rejected the request. He instead sent Colonel James Bowie with about 30 soldiers to remove the fort's heavy guns and destroy the post. When he got there, Bowie discovered there were no animals available to move the large artillery pieces. Persuaded of the location's strategic importance, he appealed straight to the interim Texas leadership for more men and weapons. His campaign was unsuccessful. The governing body, in a state of disarray, provided no assistance. Even if support had been authorized, it probably would have been too late. Bowie and Travis seriously miscalculated the speed of Santa Anna's advance. Santa Anna's attack on the Alamo began on February 23, 1836. Alerts about the nearing Mexican troops caused widespread flight in the adjacent town of Bizarre. While doubtful, Travis posted a sentry in the bell tower of San Fernando Church. Soon after, lookouts identified Mexican units barely more than a mile from the settlement. The Texans were still desperately unprepared, missing the soldiers, weaponry, and resources needed for a long fight. Their exposure became glaringly obvious when Santa Anna marched into San Antonio, leading 1,500 men. The Alamo housed only 188 defenders. To make matters worse, a significant number were inexperienced recruits. Nevertheless, when Santa Anna hoisted the blood-red banner declaring that no clemency would be granted, the Texans declined to withdraw. Travis responded by ordering a cannon shot aimed at the Mexican lines. Bowie deemed this act dangerously provocative and sent a delegate to negotiate with Santa Anna. Annoyed by Bowie's interference, Travis had his own emissary deliver a message. Mexican commanders received both men, stating that any surrender would have to be absolute. Upon learning these terms, Bowie and Travis set aside their feud and together ordered another defiant cannon shot. The men defending the Alamo were tremendously overmatched in both numbers and firepower. One might think they relied on Colonel James Bowie, a veteran fighter, for direction. However, Bowie became grievously sick by the siege's second day, rendering him completely debilitated. Two doctors, one of them the post surgeon, assessed him but could not diagnose his ailment. Bowie was at times displayed before the soldiers to raise their spirits, though experts believe this sight probably damaged morale. Seeing their acclaimed leader bedridden and helpless dismayed the largely green defenders. During the Alamo's last desperate hours, Bowie formally surrendered his command to Travis. He was killed along with all 188 defenders, although the relatives he had sheltered inside survived. The assault concluded on March 6, 1836, a 13-day siege ending with the death of every Texan fighter. Solely non-combatant women and children were permitted to live. Despite the devastating loss, experts calculate that the small garrison inflicted nearly 600 Mexican losses. More importantly, the fall of the Alamo ignited a fierce resolve among Texans, transforming into a powerful battle cry that fueled the revolution toward independence. The Alamo fell. 188 defenders lay dead. A revolution was born. But the echoes of those 13 days still whisper unanswered questions. Why did Travis and Bowie, rivals to the end, fire that final cannon together? What truly killed James Bowie? A hidden illness or a darker secret? And why did Santa Anna's unstoppable army pay such a bloody price for victory? The Alamo's defenders became legends, but legends bury truths. What if the real story isn't about heroes, but about flaws? Flaws in leadership, flaws in loyalty, flaws that doomed them all. And so the Alamo fell. The legend was born, etched not just in stone, but in the very soul of a nation. We remember the sacrifice, the battle cry, the heroes. But after our journey here today, we are left not with answers, but with haunting questions that echo across the centuries. We are left to wonder about the fragile line between rivalry and respect, as Travis and Bowie stood together for one final defiant act. Was it a moment of unity or mere desperation? We are left to puzzle over the enigmatic death of Jim Bowie, a giant of a man laid low not by a bayonet, but by an unknown ailment in a darkened room. A tragic illness, or a convenient end to a disputed command? And we are left to reckon with the ultimate, unsettling irony, that Santa Anna, in his quest to crush a rebellion with a brutal victory, instead forged its identity. He created the very martyrdom that would ensure his own defeat just weeks later at San Jacinto. The 188 defenders achieved in death what was impossible in life: total victory. But at what cost to the truth? Their story was simplified into a perfect legend, but history is never simple. It is written in the flaws, the mysteries, and the human failures often left out of the books. So we turn it over to you. What do you believe? Was Jim Bowie's death a tragic twist of fate or something else entirely? Could the Alamo have actually been held, or was its fall inevitable from the start? Tell us your theory in the comments. The story of the Alamo is over, but the search for its truth is just beginning.